Hey guys, welcome back. So in today's video, we're going to be working on the sixth problem in the Leetcode series. That's called zigzag conversion. And basically what we want to do is if we're given a string and a number of rows, we want to return the string such that though that string is divided in the number of rows. So if we look at this example with 4 rows, what happens is we have to go downwards first. This is our string right here. If we go downwards, P, A, Y, P, and then A, L, we have to go up diagonally. So A, L, I until we reach the top, and then S, H, I, and then diagonally R, I, N, G. And then at the very end, we have to return the string in the first row, and then the second row, then the third row, and the fourth row in order. So that you see here, this is the first row, uh, this is the second row, I believe this is the third row, and this is the fourth row. So we want to zigzag around until we reach the end of the string with the number of rows that we've been given. So if you guys want, pause the video and try it on your own, but if you guys have any trouble, definitely come back and we'll work on it together. So what I'm thinking is for this question, I have copied the problem here so we can look at it. What I'm thinking what we can do is I'm going to store the different strings of each row in a dictionary. And so I'm going to first create a dictionary called parts. And let me first parts. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say for I in range num rows, I'm going to say parts I is equal to an empty string. So what this is doing is in our dictionary, if we take, for example, I'm going to change this to a 4. In fact, actually, I'll just copy this whole example instead of the first example because it's a little bit, you get to see a little more. If we look at this example, what I want to do, if we're given 4 rows, I want this to be the 0 row, the first row, the 1 row, the 2 row, and the 3 row. And so I'm storing this in a dictionary where the key value is I guess the index of the row, and then the key is going to be the index, and the value is going to be the string, and so on. So we have the 1 row, the 2 row, and the 3 row. And I'm just initializing the dictionary with all the different rows. And now what I want to do is first I'm gonna create a variable called row, initialize it to 0. So what I want to do is I want to keep track of what row I'm on. And so if I'm on the 0th row, I want to append that letter to the string at that row. And so if I'm on the 0, I want to append the P there. Then I increment the row by 1. I want to append this on the first row, increment my row by 1, append this on the second row, append this on the third row. And once I get to this third row, or once I get to this last row, I want to start subtracting from my rows. So I want to go from my third row to from my fourth row to my third row, and append the A string over there, subtract rows by 1, append my L string, subtract rows by 1, append my I string. And from this point, I want to start increasing my rows again. And so that's just kind of the whole idea. I want to keep incrementing and decrementing our row until our string is empty, or until we've gone through everything in our string. And so yeah, that's going to be the idea. And at the very end, we'll kind of piece it together. And so what I'm thinking is first I'll say for letter in S, this is going to loop through every single letter in our string. What I'm going to say is S, or not S, parts, row. So this is going to call the string at each unique row, plus equals that letter. And so what we're doing is if we're on our first string, when we initialize, our row 0 is going to be an empty string. So what we're doing is we're calling the value at that key pair. So we're calling the 0 row, the string at the 0 row, and we're appending a letter onto that string. So since we're just starting out, this is going to be an empty string, and we're going to append that. And then now what we want to do is we want to check if increasing. I'll initialize those variables after increasing. We want to increase our row by 1, else I also want to subtract from our row. So the idea is we want to know when we have to add to our row and when we have to subtract from our row. So what I'm thinking is what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize a variable called isIncreasing, and I'm going to make that equal to true. And so what that's going to do is right off the bat, I'm going to assume that I'm increasing. And so what I'm going to say is I'll lower this a little. If is increasing, I want to first check to see that if I'm at the very last row, because if I'm already on the third row, on the 3 row, and I append it to it, I don't want to increment my row, because that's going to throw an error. And so what I'm going to say is if row plus 1 is equal to the num rows, I'm going to do something. And so else I'm going to append my row by 1. So what this is doing is if we're on the last row, we're on the 3 row. Remember up here we did for I in range num rows. So if we take our 4 as an example, we'll have 0, 1, 2, 3. But our 4 is not going to be in there because it's exclusive of the very last number. And so if we're on our last number over here, if we're on the last row, if we were to add 1, that should be equal to the number of rows that was passed as a parameter. So if that's equal to the number of rows, we know that we've hit the very last row, and we want to start decreasing. And so what we're going to say is increasing will be equal to false. And now we want to decrement our row. And if that's not the case, we're just going to increment our row as usual. Else, so this is going to be the opposite. This is in the case that is increasing is going to be false. So we're going to be decrementing at this point. And so what I'm going to say is if row minus 1 is equal, if row minus 1, or what we could say instead to make it a little easier, if row is equal to 0, because once we've appended to our 0 row, we've appended to our 0th row. Now, if we subtract 1, we're going to get into the negatives, which is going to throw an error. And so what we want to do is want to change it. We want to say is increasing is equal to true, and we want to increment our row by 1. So that now instead of on the 0th row, and instead of going to the -1, we're going to go to 1. And if that's not the case, if row is greater than 0, we're just going to subtract from our row as usual. So this is really like the opposite of our of this part over here. And so that is how we do that. So that's going to go down if we kind of go through our pattern. We start at the P, we append to our 0 row, we go down because 0 plus 1 is less than 4. We go down, we append the A, we append the Y, we append the P, and now since 3 plus 1 is equal to 4, we know that we have to switch it around, and now is increasing will be false, and we subtract from our row. And so now our next letter will be appended to our our 2 row, and then our next row will be appended to our 1 row, because we're gonna keep decreasing since row is not equal to 0. Once row is equal to 0, we will append to our row, and now we're gonna switch it around, flip it. Is increasing will be true, and then we're gonna start appending downwards, and then we're gonna continue appending upwards, and so on until we've gone through every single letter in our string. And so at the very end, what's gonna happen is um, we're at this point where every single part of our dictionary has been appended, and now what I'm gonna do, or has been completed. And so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a variable called s. I'm gonna say for key in parts dot keys s plus equals parts key. And so this is just going to call every single key in our dictionary in order from 0 to our num rows minus 1. And we're just going to keep appending that like we're supposed to in our answer, because I believe this is from the from 0. This is from our second row, or one row. This is from our, this whole thing is from our next row, and then these two letters are from our last row. And so that is how we can append to our string, and then at the very end, we'll return our string. So that is our little function right here. I guess the most confusing part is this, but hopefully that was a little intuitive. And we're just kind of checking for some edge cases. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to code this up in our Leetcode editor over here. So for I in range num rows parts I is going to be equal to an empty list, or an empty string. We want to say that our row is equal to 0, is increasing, is equal to true for letter in S. We want to append, so parts row plus equals the letter. If is increasing, if row plus 1 is equal to our num rows, we want to append, or no, we want to switch it around, so is increasing will be false. Row minus equals 1, else row plus equals 1, else if row is equal to 0 is increasing will be equal to true. Row plus equals 1, else you want to subtract from our rows, so we keep going upwards, I suppose. So we want to keep going that way, in that direction. I believe that was it for that. At the very end, we want to create our string for key in parts.keys s plus equals parts key return s. And so I think we copied everything as we wanted. Parts I, row is increasing, parts row is increasing, rows we handle for that. Okay, so in our console, I believe we have this example right here. So if we run the code, hopefully we should get the right answer, and we do, because we kept going downwards. Once we hit the bottom, we started going upward, and so that's kind of where the zag happens, or the zigzag. And so we're going to change it to 4. Hopefully we'll get this response right here, or this output, and we do. And last thing I want to test is, I don't know, we'll do an empty string. Return that. What if we return ABC with row 1? So this is going to throw an error. parts row. Yeah, because we for I in range 0 is only gonna cause 1. And so what we need to do is if num rows is basically less than 2, we I think it's 2. Let's see what happens if we need to return if we have 0 rows. Does it return just an empty string? Oh, okay, so there's only an error. So what we'll do is if we'll just test it out. We'll just return our S. And so if we run this, okay, so if it's 0 rows, we just want to return the actual string. And so that should be it for our idea. So the reason when we had 1 row, the reason it was throwing an error was because when we do I in range num rows, it's gonna append a key or I suppose one key value pair to our parts dictionary with the key value of 0 and an empty string. And so when we initialize our row to 0, that makes sense. That's gonna append fine. But then when we do row minus 1, it's going to do 0 minus equals 1, which is -1. And so that's going to cause an issue because there is no -1 key in our parts dictionary. And so that's why we were getting that error. And so I think if we run add 1 again, should just return S, which is what we want. And so I think this is everything. I can't really think of anything else we need to add. I'll just try this one last time, just for fun. And so we get the right answer. I'm just going to hit submit now, and hopefully this will submit. So it looks like our code is working properly. That is how you answer the zigzag problem in the Leetcode problems. Hopefully this helps you guys, and until then, see you guys later. All right, bye.